Hi guys, and welcome back to class. Today we are going to continue doing some work for our end of module task. So the first thing that I want us to do is talk about what we've done for our homework from the previous lesson. I want you to look at what the homework was from the previous lesson. Make sure that you have completed that homework because it is important that we have that completed so that we can move into the other items that we're going to be doing for our lesson today. So, the first thing that I want us to do is I want us to share at least 2 poetic types that we chose for the end of module task with each other. So remember, those poetic types were maybe it's a definition poem, a list poem, maybe it's an ode or an occasional poem, or even a free verse poem. These are all the different types of poetic types that we encountered when we read the crossover. So when you were reading the crossover book, you should have came into contact with many different types of poems or poetic types. So for example, like on page 14, we have a list poem, or on page 29, we have a definition poem. And remember, a definition poem always starts off with the title being written out as its syllables, and then the first stanza is always the definition of the title. So these are some different types of poem types that we've encountered as we've gone through our lessons. So I want you guys to share with me what are 2 poem types that you think that you're going to write your poems for our end of module portfolio or our poem portfolio. What types of poems are you going to write in? Are you going to write an ode? Are you going to write a list poem? Are you going to write a definition poem? Then I want you guys to pull out handout 29A, and I want you guys to go through there and see if there's anything left on that list that you can check off. Now, you may not have checked off everything, and that's okay, but we just want to always make sure that we check in with our planning checklist to see if there's anything that we've accomplished that we can end or we can check off because we know that we've done it. So to begin with this lesson for today, I want us to look at our focusing and our content framing question. Our focusing question is, what does it mean to be a storyteller? And our content framing question in our know stage says, how do the module's texts build my knowledge of a narrative writing? So let's go on and see, what does it mean to be a storyteller? And how do the texts that I've read this entire module, so for instance, the crossover is a text that we've read. We've also read Your Brain on Fiction. We've also read The Man Made of Words. We've read so many different things. How do those texts build my knowledge of narrative writing? What did it show us about narrative writing as we read? So now we're going to begin drafting our poems for our portfolio. Your portfolio needs to have 3 poems, and you need to make sure that you are picking different types of poetry or poetic types. So that's the definition poem or a ode or a list poem. You want to make sure you're picking different types of poem structures in order to write your poem. So our craft question, and we are in our execute stage, says, how do I use my understanding of descriptive and sensory language and narrative arc in a poetry portfolio? So the first thing that I want you guys to do is I want you to gather all of your notes from all of our informational articles from last week. Those articles are the man-made of words and your brain on fiction. You should have annotated those. You can go inside of your Google Drive to pull those up, or if you wrote them out, then that's fine as well. But you want to gather all of those notes from what you have gathered from those informational articles from last week. Then I want you guys to look at handout 29A. This is how we're going to begin drafting our end of module poetry portfolios. So here is 29A. Okay. So 29A is something that we've already completed. We've been working on it. It has our planning packet checklist, all of that good stuff. I want to direct our attention to step 1 and step 2. Make sure that you've brainstormed some ideas and you've written down some experiences that you've had. Remember, I told you about my experience of wrecking my car. You should have written as many experiences and evaluated how important those experiences are, filling out this grid, because you're going to need this in order to write your poems. Make sure that you've talked about this here. For step 3, taken together, your 3 poems will create a narrative arc. So just like in the crossover, there's many poems in here, and it creates a narrative arc. The narrative arc in the crossover is it goes from the beginning, the middle, to the end. There's no flashbacks or anything like that. But maybe yours does have a flashback. You want to make sure that your stories or your poems create a narrative arc. This is the rest of the handout. Again, making sure that you have completed this. It's extremely important that this is done. So once again, I want you to check off some things on your planning packet checklist. Remember, our planning packet checklist is also on 29A. It's at the top. Planning packet checklist. See if there's anything that you can check off on here. So let's look at our content framing question. We are in our know stage, and it says, how do the module's texts build my knowledge of the narrative writing? So let's think about all of the texts that we've read. We've read the crossover. We've read some informative writings like Your Brain on Fiction and Man-Made of Words. I want you to choose one of the poems from your portfolio and consider the use of the specific poetic type in comparison to an exemplar of the same poetic type from the crossover. So for example, you are going to go inside of your book, and let's say you wrote a poem that was a list poem. So you're going to go inside of the crossover and find an example of a list poem. Or if you wrote a definition poem, you're going to go into the crossover and find a definition poem. Or you can use some of the exemplar poems that we studied as well. And I want you to see how your poem compares to the poem that is the exemplar poem, or the poem that's inside of the book, the crossover. You're choosing one of your poems and consider why you chose to use that specific poetic type and compare it to why maybe the exemplar poem is written in the same poetic type. I'll have your discussion board inside of Schoology for you to write down some thoughts. Why did you choose a definition poem, and why do you think that maybe the author of the crossover chose the same definition poem? Or maybe you wrote a poem that was similar to the exemplar packet of poems that I put inside of Schoology. Why do you think that you chose that particular type, and so forth? For homework, I want you guys to complete your first draft of your poetry portfolio. So remember, you have to have 3 poems. Using your handout 29A on step 5. 29A, step 5 is After you have completed the first draft of your poems and before you receive feedback, write a cover letter with 3 to-seek paragraphs. Topic, sentence, evidence, elaboration, concluding statement, in which you, and the rest is here. Go ahead and complete your first draft of poems and start on step 5 of handout 29A. Again, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to come to office hours. My office hours have changed because I am doing hybrid, so I have some students on campus and some in the school. So if you are needing attention or help, my office hours are only the morning office hours are available. So please come there. You'll see those links inside of Schoology in order to be assisted. All right, that's going to be it for today. If you guys, once again, have any questions, please let me know. I'll see you soon. Bye.